The morning she discovered the marriage contract was the morning her entire future collapsed. The parchment trembled in her hands as she stared at the elegant signature at the bottom of the page. Her father's seal, her father's handwriting, her father's promise. And beneath it, the name of the most scandalous gentleman in all of England, the Duke of Blackthorne. A man whispered about in drawing rooms, a man mothers warned their daughters against, a man whose reputation for coldness, arrogance, and mystery had become the subject of endless gossip. "No," she whispered. The word escaped her lips like a prayer. "No, this cannot be." Yet the ink did not change. The agreement remained. By the end of the month, she was to become his Duchess. A cold draught swept through her father's library, stirring the flames in the hearth. Candlelight flickered against towering shelves of leather-bound books, casting long shadows across the room. For several moments she simply stood there, unable to breathe, unable to think, unable to understand how her life had become a commodity to be exchanged. The library door opened. Her father entered. The weary expression upon his countenance told her everything. "You have found it." She turned sharply. "Tell me it is false." Silence. "Father!" His shoulders sagged. "It is not false." The words struck harder than any blow. Her fingers tightened around the contract. "You promised me freedom." "I promised you security." "I never asked for this." "You do not understand the circumstances." Tears threatened to rise, but she refused them. "I understand perfectly. You have sold me." His face twisted with pain. "I have saved this family." The confession echoed through the library. Only then did she notice how pale he appeared, how deeply lined his face had become, how tired his eyes looked. The realization arrived slowly. The estate was in trouble, far greater trouble than she had imagined. "The debts?" she asked quietly. He nodded. "Far worse than anyone knows." A terrible silence followed. "The Duke offered assistance?" "He offered marriage." She closed her eyes. Outside, rain tapped gently against the manor windows, a melancholy rhythm, the sound of dreams dissolving. "Why would he want me?" she asked. Her father hesitated. "That question," he said softly, "has troubled me as well." 3 weeks later she arrived at Blackthorne Manor. The journey had felt like a funeral procession. Every mile carried her farther away from the life she had imagined. The carriage rolled through immense iron gates. Beyond them stretched a magnificent estate. Ancient stone walls rose from the mist. Towering windows reflected the grey afternoon sky. The manor itself appeared less like a home and more like a fortress, a place built to keep the world away. Her stomach tightened. She had heard countless stories about its owner, none of them pleasant. The carriage stopped. A footman opened the door. She stepped onto the gravel drive. The chill autumn air immediately swept beneath her cloak. Then she saw him, standing at the top of the stone steps, the Duke of Blackthorne. He was taller than she expected, broad-shouldered, dark-haired, his expression unreadable. There was nothing charming about him, nothing warm, nothing inviting. Yet there was something undeniably commanding, a presence that seemed to dominate the very air around him. As she approached, his grey eyes settled upon her, calm, observant, almost unsettling. For several moments neither spoke. Then he inclined his head. "My lady," she curtsied. "Your Grace, your journey was comfortable?" It was tolerable. A faint flicker touched his eyes, perhaps amusement, perhaps irritation, she could not tell. "I appreciate honesty," he said. "Then you shall receive it." "Indeed?" She lifted her chin. "I do not wish to be here." A shocked gasp emerged from one of the servants nearby. The Duke, however, remained entirely unmoved.
"If it offers any comfort," he replied, "neither do I." For the first time she found herself speechless. The notorious Duke turned and began ascending the steps. "Come," he said, "the weather grows unpleasant." And just like that, her marriage began. The wedding itself occurred 3 days later, a small ceremony, no grand celebration, no eager anticipation, no eager smiles, only duty, only obligation, only necessity. The chapel candles flickered softly as vows were exchanged. His gloved hand enclosed hers, firm, steady, unemotional. When the minister declared them husband and wife, a strange emptiness settled within her chest. She had become a duchess, yet she felt utterly alone. The weeks that followed were worse, far worse. Her husband remained distant, polite, respectful, but distant. They shared meals, they attended social obligations, they occupied the same manor, yet they existed like strangers. Every corridor felt cold, every conversation brief, every silence endless. Then the rumours began, again, as they always did. At a London ball one evening, she overheard them. Ladies clustered together beneath glittering chandeliers, silk skirts rustling softly, fans fluttering, whispers spreading. They say his former fiancée vanished. They say she fled. They say he ruined her, or perhaps something worse. The laughter that followed made her blood run cold. She had heard fragments before, but never clearly, never directly. That night she returned to Blackthorne Manor deeply unsettled. Questions haunted her, questions she could no longer ignore. Near midnight she wandered into the west wing, a portion of the manor that remained largely unused. The corridors were silent. Moonlight spilled through tall windows. Dust lingered in the air. Then she discovered a locked door. Curiosity compelled her forward. The key remained in the lock. She turned it. The door opened. Inside stood a forgotten bedchamber. Everything remained untouched, as though frozen in time. A delicate shawl rested on a chair. Books lay beside a fireplace. Fresh flowers had been replaced only days earlier. Someone still cared for this room. Someone still maintained it. Her pulse quickened. Then she noticed a portrait above the mantel. A beautiful young woman, golden-haired, elegant, smiling. The former fiancée, the woman who had disappeared. Footsteps suddenly sounded behind her. She spun around. The Duke stood in the doorway. For the first time since their marriage, genuine emotion blazed across his face. Anger, raw and immediate. "You should not be here." The sharpness of his voice startled her. She drew herself upright. Who was she? Silence. "Your Grace!" I refused to answer. "Why?" Pain flashed across his features, gone almost instantly, but she had seen it. For one brief moment she had seen beneath the Duke's armour, and what she saw was not cruelty. It was heartbreak, profound, devastating heartbreak. The realization left her stunned. Whoever this woman had been, whatever had happened, the truth was far more complicated than society believed, far more tragic. And for the very first time since becoming his wife, she began to wonder whether the notorious Duke of Blackthorne was not the villain of the story at all, but its greatest victim.